Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation and Audie. So I don't have to start by telling you where Audie is. You can see for yourselves. It's snowing out. It's very light. It's just sort of a little sprinkle of snow. It's not sticking to the road. It is sticking to the yard. And, I never really thought Audie cared all that much about having snow in his yard. But when he saw our snow melt and everyone else in the neighborhood had their snow still in their yard, it just didn't seem to amuse him. And I think he was beginning to suspect they had stolen his snow, because he'd go over and stare at their snow, just go into their yards, sit, look at their snow, and then come back here and stare out the window at his lack of snow. So I'm not sure what's going on in that little cat head. But right now, he is watching the snow come down. There is a window right over here, and that's where his attention is focused. So yes, we have Audie time. Yellow. The yellow is in my earrings today, mostly because I wanted to show you this brooch as well. So let's start with the yellow, and then we'll move on to the brooch. The yellow is for Catherine. It's for Lex's mom. It's for everyone who is coping with cancer. And this is just our way of saying we are sending our very, very best wishes out to you. You're not forgotten. You are not uncared for. So we will definitely be keeping all of you in our thoughts. Now, the brooch. I'm going to show you a picture of this because I know you're not going to be able to make heads or tails out of it. So let's take a look at a close-up. This was a gift from Karen Hopper, and she's one of our suemeangels Angels, one of the ladies who runs the suemeangels Angels Facebook site they do it for themselves, but it certainly benefits the channel. And I am indeed grateful to them for their support. And they are a group of very talented, just crafty, artistic people. And Karen sent me this. So, as you saw from the picture, it's sort of brutalist / steampunk. And the great thing about it is I can wear it in either orientation, either this way or flip it, and bang, upside down, it looks just as good. To tell the truth, I'm not sure which way is the right orientation. And usually I just switch it around depending on how good it looks on whatever it is I'm wearing at the moment. So do you want to go? So that is why there is no scarf or no more yellow, just this, just so I can show it off. Because I have thought I really want to make a point of sharing some of the great jewelry I have gotten from, and not just jewelry, we'll find other things too, but some of the great things I have gotten from our viewers and our channel partners over the years. And this is one of my favorite pieces, because of the steampunk. And ordinarily, I do not put this on undergarments. No. Oh, that sounded weird, didn't it? Obviously, I'm not putting it on my bra, but I put it on outer garments, jackets, blazers, heavier sweaters, that sort of thing. I'm not sure what, well, yes, I am. I want everybody to see it. So this one, I actually had to go into my closet, take it off a blazer, and put it on and say, yeah, okay, everybody's going to get a look. All right, so we are going to pick up a thread from yesterday's video when we come back after the intro. Okay, so for those of you who may not have caught yesterday's broadcast, we were talking about my nostalgia for the 1980s. And I have a little bit, a tiny bit of nostalgia for every decade I have lived through. They all had their good points. They all had their bad points. But in my personal experience, the 1980s had more good points and fewer bad points than any of the other decades I lived through. So that is where my sense of nostalgia tends to kind of settle and nest. And it turns out that a lot of you are in the same situation. Interestingly enough, a lot of the people who have that 80s nostalgia are not exactly my age. A lot of you are younger, some of you are older, but I'm guessing this isn't a common nostalgia point in my specific age group. So, yeah, what can I say? I'm a trailblazer. But one of the themes that came up in the comments again and again was mall culture. Just the whole idea of having shopping malls available to us, that experience. And it was a different sort of experience from what our mothers and grandmothers were used to, because when they would go out shopping, they would go out to a store, not to a whole collection of stores. So my mother, when she was younger, would go out to whatever stores she had in the tiny little town she grew up in. And later, when she was in the city, she would go out to one specific store, even though in the city there might be a dozen stores you could easily walk to in the space of an afternoon. It just wasn't the way her mind approached shopping. She was not into those sort of one-stop shopping thing. You would go to the clothing store today, you would go to the hardware store tomorrow, you would go to the butcher the next week. She was not used to the concept of having everything just right in front of her all the time. Interestingly enough, malls actually began, see, I know this. I went online and looked it up to make sure that I was not just correct in my firmly held belief that Rhode Island had the first shopping mall, and it was the Arcade, and it was established in 1828. So, yeah, I mean, I knew that one going in. If you're from Rhode Island, you have to know that. It's like part of the common. That was my cat breaking something. Excuse me. Okay, all cleaned up. I'm not kidding when I say that cat is a ball of mischief. Anyway, it's just part of the sort of common cultural awareness in Rhode Island. Oh yeah, we have the first shopping mall. But even though malls date back to the 19th century, well, 1828 is pretty much the early 19th century, Rhode Island is not the only state that had a mall going back to the 19th century. Several other states did as well. But our version of malls was really established as a nationwide phenomenon in about the 1960s. And 50 states, I'm giving you an estimate. Yes, okay. He's going to suck up to me because he knows he was a bad boy and he doesn't want to get into trouble. And so we're looking at an approximate time frame of the 1950s. They didn't really begin flourishing until very much in the later 1960s, early 1970s. But by the 80s, they were their own independent phenomenon. Everybody had a mall by the 1980s. All 50 states, there was a mall. Thank you. Don't do that. All right. Okay, go. Yeah, he's in the mood. So everybody had a mall by then. And that's when mall culture emerged. Just that whole shopping mall experience. And It was interesting. It was different. Like I said, my mother didn't shop that way. Well, actually, she did, because believe me, when the malls opened, my mother was all into that. But it was a different kind of shopping experience than that generation was used to. They were not accustomed to going in to a large building and having everything, every possible store you could want. Do you want to go into Woolworths and get, five and dime type goods, whatever that was? Inexpensive plastic tablecloths. I remember my mother used to get a lot of those at Woolworths. You could go into the major department stores because most of the malls had a major department store or two or three. They referred to them as anchor stores, and they were ordinarily located at either end of the mall. And they were the main draw to get the consumers into the mall. And then the other smaller stores that might not have had the same marketing power as a store like Sears, for example. Sears was a major anchor store in many, if not most, of the malls in the United States. And the smaller stores just didn't have the marketing power of a behemoth like Sears, like Montgomery Ward, like Bloomingdale's. Later in the 80s, Bloomingdale's was one of the anchor stores at my local mall. So you would have this giant building full of everything you could possibly want. And some of the things that made the malls very attractive was the liminal space. That is what it is. We did a series of videos. I think it was about a year or two ago on liminal spaces. And this is a large space, liminal. You are going through this space. It is your avenue from point A to point B. And a mall was a great liminal space. You were not in the mall for the sake of being in the mall, not initially anyway. It was simply an area you passed through to get to the store you wanted to go to. But the malls got smart and realized that they have this massive space and began developing it. So you would see things like food courts, and it would be ornately planted and decorated with 3-story glass elevators and just, the works. And in some malls, because some states have some very, very large malls, it was very, very impressive. And so these liminal spaces began to attract people just as much as the stores did. Teenagers, that was the big thing in the 80s with mall culture. Teenagers would go there to hang out because, after all, you hit a certain age, 16 mostly, you've got a driver's license, somebody among your friend group could borrow a car, everybody piles in, everybody goes to the mall, and you can have a very exciting and entertaining afternoon of hanging out in the mall, which was sparkly, and it didn't cost you anything. The food courts, and many of them had food courts, even from the early days of the mall's openings. Food courts became a big thing by the 1980s, and this is where you could go get a soda, get a slice of pizza, whatever. It was very inexpensive. These were not fine sit-down restaurants by any stretch of the imagination. There was no dress code. So, yeah, kids could go straight from school, show up, get their snacks, hang out on the seating that the mall very graciously provided for scores, if not hundreds, of shoppers just throughout the central mall court. It was a great, fun, low-cost afternoon. And in the comments, we had people saying, well, yeah, I remember that. And now the malls are closing. Where do people go when, it's cold, it's gloomy, it might be raining, whatever. You've got 2 or 3 kids at home. Where do you go? And I don't have an answer for that. I really do not know what we have now that replaces the mall as a good family-friendly place where you could go, where you would have food available, you would have restroom facilities available, you would have security available. Oh, and back in the 80s, you had plenty of payphones as well, so that it was a relatively safe and reasonably supervised environment. It wasn't like picking your kids up, tossing them out the front door and saying, go run the streets like hooligans. You packed them up in the car, you brought them to the mall, and you could find all kinds of amusement for them. They had kiddie play areas. Those were usually free of charge, by the way, like little bouncy castles for the toddlers, because the merchants in the mall understood that if they wanted to grab the dollars from mom, they were going to have to give her something to do with her kids while she was spending the money. So yeah, all kinds of little child-friendly spaces. They had arcades where you could drop off your children. You just go to the arcade, you drop off your children, and the arcade doors would be closed, so your kids couldn't flee. And they were supervised. There were people in there. You would give the arcade proprietor, which was probably a teenage kid, you give them the money, they would give your kids the tokens, and it was free babysitting, basically, And I know we look at this from the perspective of 2025 and say, how could people just dump their kids off somewhere and go shopping? Well, it was normal, and it was safe. You really don't see headlines from that period about children being abducted from the arcades. Not to say these things never happened. Bad things always happen out there, but it wasn't the sort of plague we might be imagining looking back on it today. The children were relatively safe, they were entertained, and they did have adult supervision on the premises. Also, they had security guards at the malls. So these were relatively safe places. Personally, I would not have just left a kid at the arcade. I would not have done that. But that's me. I'm a little paranoid. Other people did it. They had no problem, and I'm not passing judgment on them. Like I say, everybody did it. And you could go off as a mom, do a little shopping, come back, grab your kids, go over to the next entertaining area, the bouncy castle for the younger children. It was a mall culture. It was there to provide amusement, recreation, and shopping opportunities for everyone. So this was the 80s. That was the high point of the malls. Now we fast forward, we start to go into the 21st century, and the malls began dying because, in large part, online shopping did a number on mall business. Also, massive discount retailers like Walmart, they ate into a lot of the money that was going into mall stores previously, because not every community had a giant, big box store. Not every community had a Walmart. Not every community had a Costco's or a Sam's Club or whatever your big box merchant is. So people were more of a captive audience in some parts of the country. Later, when there is a Walmart in my small town, and I'm not kidding you, we have like a half a dozen streetlights here, and that's it. But we got a Walmart. So I don't even know what to say about that. I think there are 3 dry cleaners in all of Carlisle, but we have a Walmart. So yeah, Walmart is everywhere. Oh, and I have been to universities with a larger population than this town. So it's all over the place. These major discount mass market retailers have gobbled up a lot of the business, as has the internet. Post 2020, of course, I guess that was probably the final nail in the coffin. And the malls are becoming a thing of the past. There are still a few malls out there. Not a great many, to be sure. Nowhere near as many as there once were. And nobody seems to be interested in building new malls. The reason for that is obvious. If you want to open a shopping center, because this is what they're doing now, it's going to be a strip mall where you have store, giant parking lot, and no liminal space. And the reason this is more attractive to businesses today is that liminal space had to be lit, it had to be heated, it had to be cooled, it had to be cleaned, it had to have a certain number of restrooms, drinking fountains, seating, and decorations, things like those lovely plants. I was in New England, our malls had palm trees. Like, what? But it's true, our malls did have palm trees. And that costs money. Additionally, you had security people that were just part of the overhead, because obviously it's a place that has to be secured in some way. So yeah, a mall is a more expensive venture than a strip mall. So I get it. I understand why the few remaining malls are not indoor shopping wonderlands the way they used to be. I understand that those liminal spaces cost money to maintain. I also think that there may come a time when we start getting back into that mindset that we need to provide a place, a third space for people. That it's all well and good to say, yes, let's go out and do some shopping. Let's take the kids to the movie theater. Oh, and there were movie theaters at most of the malls I've ever seen. Now, we don't have that anymore, and I think in time we may look to recover some of that and say, well, I just went into Starbucks, I got my coffee, and I would like to sit somewhere. Quiet, or maybe not. Maybe you're into the excitement, but I would like to sit somewhere and enjoy my coffee. And if it's January, I would like the heat to be on. And I would like not to be sitting out on a street corner. I would like to be in an attractive building where I could just look around and enjoy the sights. Malls did other things for people too. And when I think about enjoying the sights, this comes to mind. People would have walking clubs, especially older people, and you would see, particularly in the early morning hours when the malls would first open, you would see large groups of senior citizens before the malls got crowded, just making the circuit around the perimeter of that mall court while businesses were opening their stores or perhaps just turning on their lights and doing their inventory. And that space was provided free of charge by the mall. And it was a climate-controlled space. It was safe. It had level ground. It had stairs if you were an older person who wanted to do stairs, but you could get some exercise. It was one of the great things that the malls provided for the larger community. That is passing away. I do not know where older people walk anymore. I certainly do not know what happens when there are major storms, because there was a time back in the 80s when if there was a major storm and your heating went out, you would simply go to the mall. That's what everyone did. And the local government support facilities, the police, the fire department, etc., would have a presence there in order to get people to safety for the 24, 48 hours, whatever it took to get power restored and get people safely back in their now heated homes. So yes, they provided a very good service. But the big thing about malls in the 80s, and certainly I think this is the part that resonates with most of us that have nostalgia for mall culture, was the glitz and the glamour and just seeing everything. And we discussed this in yesterday's video comments, as I said, and one of the things that Colleen had pointed out in her comment was there was a character to every store. You could get all kinds of things. It wasn't same old, same old, same old, which is what you get today. And that is something I have noticed myself from my brick and mortar shopping. Every store I go into has the same stuff. I cannot go from one store to another and find a different assortment of goods. In the days of the mall's heyday, in the 1980s, you could go into stores like the Gap or Limited or Express or one of those and get clothing for fashionable young people. You could go into department stores like Bonwit Teller and get clothes for fashionable older people. You could go over to the other store at the other end of the mall, get perfume or cosmetics. Everything was there. But every store had its own particular flavor. And one of the things I said to Colleen was, in those days, you didn't need to see the names of the stores. You could just walk by the window and tell which store it was, because after a while, we all got very acclimatized to what their offerings were. It didn't matter if I did not see the dress that they're showing in the window today. First time I see it, I still know it's the Gap, because I know what kind of clothing the Gap sells, and so on, right on down the line. It offered a great deal of variety, more variety than I think we do have today in our shopping. And it was right there in front of your face. You didn't have to go looking for it. You didn't have to go on a Google search. You didn't have to think about what you wanted. They would throw ideas out at you. It was our generation's version of, your Pinterest page. Just here it is. You see a look you like? It's at that store. Maybe I'll stop in and check out what else they have. It was smart marketing on behalf of the stores, but it produced a very interactive experience for the shoppers. So I think we lost a lot when we lost mall culture. I think we lost the glitz. I think we lost the excitement. I think we lost the safe place for parents to go with very young children. I think we lost that sort of safe spot for teenagers to go, where there was security there. They had payphones, they had restrooms. You didn't have to worry too much about what was going on. And also it was very public. so you didn't have to worry too much about what was going on. Now, Lord only knows where the teenagers are or what they are up to. So I expect a lot of parents are thinking this may not be a great trade-off. I do think we lost something when we lost that culture. I think we would have benefited. Can I put you down? I think we would have benefited if we had tried to come up with alternatives to the good things we lost, instead of just discarding it all and saying, oh, this is a temple to American consumerism, let us shun it. It was. The malls absolutely were a temple to American consumerism, but they also gave back a lot too. That's, I think, a big part of what we are missing out on. And I miss the bright lights and the bright colors because, let's face it, 80s fashion was nothing if not wildly colorful. I miss that. And do I think I'm going to be able to find it again? No, because the few remaining malls that I have been to have changed their flavor a great deal. And it's no longer all of the glitz. They are no longer just grabbing and screaming for our attention. And that was part of the joy of hanging out in a mall. All right. We are going to take a look at a slideshow on the way out. For those of you who join us for just chatting, it will be 8 o'clock this evening, New York City time. For the rest of you, I hope to see you back here next weekend, and maybe we'll just start taking a look at some of the other decades and just explore the decades that you are nostalgic for, because I have lived through 7 of them. So I got a pretty good handle on what was going on in each of those decades. All right, so slideshow on the way out, and until next time, have a terrific day.